All right, you have the right to remain silent, but don't count on the police to tell you that. The right-wing Supreme Court gutted Miranda rights this week by ruling that officers cannot be sued for failing to provide the Miranda warning before questioning someone in their custody. The decision will cut off a critical avenue for justice and will, of course, disproportionately impact Black folks and also many brown folks as well. Joining me now, Atiba Goff. He's the co-founder and CEO of the Center for Policing Equity. He's also a professor of African American Studies and Psychology at Yale University. Philip, so happy to have you here this morning. You reached out to us for a change. I was so happy. I was like, oh great, Philip's available. I'll take him. Because you're the ideal person to talk to about this. Everybody wants to talk to you about these issues. SCOTUS is essentially saying that if the police fail to inform you of your rights, you can't sue them. Break it down for us and explain to our viewers what impact this will have on our community.
Right, so Miranda was designed, the Miranda warning that we're used to seeing on cop shows and the rest, it's designed to make sure you're aware of your 5th and 6th Amendment rights, your right not to incriminate yourself and your right to counsel. What this decision says is that, hey, that shouldn't be infringed, you still have the right, but if the police happen not to remember or if they don't tell you about it, then you can't sue them for failing to make sure that you knew your rights. So on the sort of baseline, what it does is it creates or it removes the protections against law enforcement doing even more dastardly things as they're thinking about interrogating you, as they're detaining you, all of the things where we want law enforcement to be bound by the Constitution. But there's a deeper component to this that I really want people to understand. So why I reached out to talk to you about this. The reason we have the right to sue law enforcement is because of a law that was passed in 1871. That's the height of Reconstruction, back when the United States had people in government who fought to protect Black people against the conditions of chattel slavery. I know it's hard to remember, but we did have that time in the United States. 1871, at the height of Reconstruction, we passed something called the Third Enforcement Act, but it was better known as the Ku Klux Klan Act. 42 USC section 1983 said specifically, hey, folks who are police officers, they can't intimidate or abuse folks, right? Especially when it comes to voting rights. But it's the police who sometimes acted on behalf of the Klan that needed to be called out in this legislation. It is that law that is the way that folks have sued law enforcement for infringing upon folks' rights. It is that law that is essentially gutted. The law that protected Black folks from racial terrorism during the heyday of the Ku Klux Klan, when this country cared about that thing, that is the law that this ruling eviscerates. So I want to be clear, in part because we don't know that history, we no longer have the right to be told about our rights. And that's happening at exactly the same time that folks are passing both laws that protect law enforcement against prosecution and laws that prevent us from learning our history. This stuff is coordinated, and I need folks to know that.
This is why we need you on TV this morning, because that is such a through line that I think a lot of people don't understand when we say things like it's systemic, it is white supremacy built into the system. Everything about that, you're right, these are coordinated efforts that aim to erode our rights. And when we try to warn people, it's because we have the most intimate experience with things like this. We see it coming a mile away. But the most urgent thing I do think, Philip, is outside of understanding where these laws come from, what I'm concerned about is my brethren, my fellowship, my community. When you find yourself in that position, when you're facing off with law enforcement and you have not been warned of your Miranda rights, what should people do? How should people handle that situation? Because if you can't sue the police, I do wonder what impact this will have on the justice system as you try to navigate a very punishing justice system to folks who look like you and me.
Yeah, so it's incredibly difficult. Know Your Rights campaigns are going to be even more important. The first question is always, are you detaining me or am I free to go? If you are free to go, walk away slowly and calmly, but they have to tell you whether or not you're free to go. If you're being detained, you can say, great, I'd like to speak to my lawyer. That's it. Don't ever think that you can get into a verbal spat or that it's good just to talk casually. I'd like to speak to my lawyer. If I am not free to go, you are detaining me, I'd like to speak to my lawyer. And I want to also have folks understand that this is in the context of state and local, but earlier this month, the court in a decision that wasn't as sort of lifted up as this one, in Egbert versus Boulay, they did the same thing for federal law enforcement. So because federal law enforcement, in this case it was Customs and Border Patrol, they have a national security interest. Now there's no undercover law that you can sue when they violate your civil rights. I cannot overstate how terrible a situation that is. So for those who are caught up in the situation, am I free to go? I'd like to speak to my lawyer. But for everybody else, we got to be not just voting, but organizing outside of electoral politics. This needs to be a concerted effort for generations to come, because they have just sent us generations back.
Yes, we have to reimagine democracy, that if this government is truly for the people, by the people, of the people, what does it look like if that includes folks who look like us? Such profound words from you. I just want to say a friend of mine got in a situation before, and she was being questioned by the police, and she said she didn't want to ask for a lawyer because she didn't want to appear to look guilty. Who cares how you appear? Ask for a lawyer if you find yourself in that situation. So thank you for those words. Philip Atiba Goff, please come back very soon. We always need your insight here. And coming up next for you folks at home,